Welcome to the Way of the Disciple, designed to equip everyday people to walk in the way of Jesus and help others do the same. This training follows our discipleship process here at News Story: connect, imitate, and influence. Each week, we'll walk through a key part of that process with practical tools and teaching to show that discipling someone is possible, and God can use you to play a part in growing God's kingdom, person by person, family by family, generation by generation. In the description below each weekly episode, you'll find the worksheets used in the class so that you can have the same tools in your hands. We're glad you're here. Let's step into the way of the disciple together. Well, good morning. Glad you guys are here. I've always loved the rain, and it's fantastic. The only time I don't like the rain is when you have an event and it's going to be outside, but I think we'll be all right today. So today's week 4. We're going to be starting in the way of the disciple. This is our last week of this. So I just want to say thank you for coming to this class and participating in this, because I truly do believe in my heart that I want to see more and better followers of Jesus, and it's going to require us playing a part in doing that and to really fulfill the Great Commission, to go and make disciples. And I really want to see that in the life of our church. And for you that have time to do this, I want you to pray about thinking about discipling somebody. I think you can do it. And today we're actually going to be walking through the curriculum that we've chosen and kind of reason why we've done that. But before we even open up that, we'll talk about some other things first. So part of our goal for our church here as we get into the workbooks is, again, our mission is what? What is our mission as a church?
Make more better disciples.
Make more better followers of Jesus. So we're helping people become more and better followers of Jesus. That's what our goal in discipleship is, right? We want to see more and better. Now, the question we've been trying to answer is how do we actually go about doing that? And what do we do in discipleship? And so we talked about the connect the first week. What was the main thing we talked about in that first week? Do you guys remember? Building relational trust. Right. And now, why is that important?
Without the trust, you won't connect.
Way to use the word. Okay, yeah. So without trust, truth can't connect. Right? Because we have these truths about who Jesus is and what the Bible teaches, and yet if they don't trust us, that truth is not going to land. Maybe, let's say it this way, not as well. And then what was the second week? Imitate. What were we trying to do in imitating? Yeah, that's week 3. So imitate, we're talking about building core practices, right? So these practices are not just good Christian things to do, but they're what form a heart and form a life with Jesus. And then last week we talked about influence is helping people join the mission of Jesus. And so part of what we try to be is be trustworthy, be sustainable in our influence. And how do we use that? And when it comes down to this, our definition for discipleship, I'm going to read it one more time for you, is intentionally entering into relationships to help people follow Jesus, be changed by Jesus, and join the mission of Jesus. So that's what some of the things we've been talking about in this class. And so I'm going to make sure everyone's with us in week 4, which is right there. There we go. And so now as we're getting into your workbooks on week 4, yeah, is everyone there with me?
I think so.
Okay, so here's I want to start with a question. Why do you think it's important to have structure in discipleship?
It could be confusing if you didn't.
Okay, why would it be confusing?
Well, if you're presenting more than one thing at a time or something, I think it would be confusing to me if somebody tried to do that.
Yeah, as we're learning in this class, we're presenting a lot of things in a row, so it can be confusing if I'm not clear. Yeah.
Well, if one person is telling the person one thing, and another person is telling another thing, and another person is telling
How do you make sense of what you're learning? Yeah. Okay. What else? Anyone else? Why is having structure in discipleship important? Someone said something. Or what's the danger about going in without a plan?
That'd be me.
Shooting from the hip. Well, here's what can happen. Is discipleship can just simply turn into having coffee with somebody. Now, that is a great thing to build relational trust, but we're not just having coffee. We're trying to form a life with Jesus. We're trying to help someone become a better follower of Jesus. And so part of a structure is good. So in your guys' workbooks, you're going to see, yeah, Mary?
The first thing we do,
Is prayer?
and then...
Okay, you've told me that every week, so.
And then make a friend.
Make a friend. Building what? Relational trust. Okay. All right, so then in here, there's in your books there, you're going to see goal is the idea is not just to get through the material, but what does it say? But to walk with someone toward Christ-likeness, right? So that's the goal in our, ultimately as we get to the end of this. But then the posture we have is the idea of being a fellow traveler, not just a teacher. Because a lot of people can teach. And who remembers school at all? Anybody remember school going through? Okay. For some of you, it was a long time ago. For some of you, not that while. Do you
Still had school back then.
Yeah, there was still school back then until 8th grade, you know. But what do you remember every single thing your teacher told you? No. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so you do? Great.
She said, do your homework. Do your homework.
But think about your teachers. If you remember one teacher, probably the best thing they did was connect with you in some way. That, hey, when you think about, man, this teacher really made an impact in my life. You don't necessarily remember the content, you remember the person. And so the idea is we're trying to walk with people to help them become and be changed by Jesus. And so, and then the focus is to help them hear Jesus, to obey Jesus, and become more like Jesus. And this is why I love this tool that we have. And ultimately, you're fill in the blank. I haven't got to the mindset isn't about finishing a book. It's about forming a life with Jesus. Because in this curriculum, it's under the mindset. It's like the second, right there. Forming a life with Jesus mindset. Sorry. Because it can be very easy in discipleship to be able to here, take this book and walk them through this book. And once you get done, you're done. And then shake your hands. But what's the problem with that approach to discipleship?
It's not the acts thing, because acts doesn't end. So discipleship or your growth or your walk with Christ.
It doesn't, it shouldn't be into it. Yeah, Michelle.
Some people don't learn that way. Some people learn by talking to each other or people explaining to them.
Yeah, some people learn very differently, and some people aren't going to be able to be like, okay, I got 5 weeks, I've done my thing, but what happens? People becomes a project or a task. And so what we're trying to do in this is trying to show you this is going to be a tool more than anything. So this is what I love about this tool, and it's because it's biblically grounded, but it's relational and flexible. We'll get into a lot of this later. This is just for your own sake. It gives clear weekly rhythms to follow and also some applications. It creates confidence for the discipler, which is probably important for you guys, and clarity for the disciplee, what we kind of talked about, why having structure helps. But it's also built to multiply. So the goal in this is once you walk through this book, hopefully they can be to a point where they can now walk someone else through it. So the goal is with multiplication. And in here, you guys, if you flip the page, you guys can read more about the overview of that, but if you flip the page, this is what you're going to see in each of these sections of this curriculum is there's 5 things really that's going to happen. There's going to be a connection time. There's going to be some Bible exploration, or it's going to be called story, application and practice, personal commitment, and then a follow-up from the discipler. So all these things and elements are going to be in this curriculum. And what's going to be really important in this is you guys are going to have to do the work ahead of time. And we'll talk more in this in a second. But we're trying to do this in a way that makes sense, and we're trying to help you. Remember, this is about presence, not perfection. Because part of discipleship, we want to have all these things. We want to make sure we think through every single thing so that way we don't mess up for our disciplee. But that's just not life. So our goal is to use this as a tool and a resource to make truth connect to the person you're discipling. And so as we get into this, I just got some key tips before we start walking through this. Key tips for disciple makers. Be flexible. You're going to see that. Why is being flexible important?
Well, because for one thing, sometimes you need to be more patient with some people than the others.
Yeah.
And other people will be bored already and want to go on to the next thing.
Yeah, and you might want to get through the book, but that might not be what they need in that moment. Then you need to also be what? Be real. You need to be prayerful throughout this entire process. And then the last thing you need to be is be encouraging as we head into disciple making. Because this is something new, so we're going to try to celebrate progress, not perfection. Just like for you, it's presence, not perfection. We're going to celebrate progress over perfection for your disciple E. So this morning, before I hand out the books, what I wanted to do is I wanted to really just teach this in a way that actually mimics what you would be doing in disciple making. And so part of what we try to do in disciple making is the first part is what? Connection time. So in here, I have some questions for you. As a connection time is the idea of some reflective questions. Actually, I'm going to say them. They're not in your books because I added this morning. So in connection time, what are you trying to do with your disciplee? Check in personally. Yeah, you're trying to celebrate small wins. That's in there, right? You're going to try to connect with them. This is all about building relational trust, okay? And so let me ask you guys right now. I think there's some important questions under each of these that as I was working through, that there is reflective questions you can ask, like basically like, hey, what's been on your mind or your heart this week? What's something you've been wrestling with lately? Emotional check-in is the idea is like, hey, how have you been doing this week? What's heavy on your heart? Spiritual life is maybe you talked about something going on in their life. How can we be praying? And so in this connection time, life and community, we could talk about, hey, how's your parents? How's your mom? How's your kids? All that different stuff. And then just kind of intentional moments you've had with them. And so all these conversation starters are good for building relational trust in your disciple-making time. And you don't have to do every single one of these. And so let me just ask you guys a question. Let's just talk. Where have you seen God at work this week in your life? I'll tell you what I've been learning while I'm handing these books out real quick. We have to share because I only have like 8 copies, and so you'll have to share up with 2 people. I'll hand those over to you. And I've been actually studying Ecclesiastes, which is a super joyful book and a hopeful book. But it's been actually super inviting because I am just learning to actually just like enjoy the moment. And Ecclesiastes over and over will be like, hey, life is meaningless. Work, all there is good is work. Yet it's like, hey, just enjoy the time you have. And so it's been kind of cool. But part of connection is, especially in that first week, when we asked those questions at the very end, you guys simply just talked. And now, like Dawn mentioned, struggling with carrying something for somebody, that connected with a lot of you. And so when you're discipling somebody, asking some of the questions, you might hear something they say, and that's why we want to be flexible, is because if Dawn's carrying something like that, your conversation might shift over to, hey, how can we carry that? Or when we jump to the end about application, what can we do to help Dawn figure out that? And so that's part of what we're trying to do in this. And so as we get into this today, is I want you to turn to actually page 22 in that study. We're going to start on chapter 2, page 22. In the exploration part of this. And we're going to start week 2, session 2. And again, the expectation I have if you're going to be a discipler is that you've done the work before the meeting. Meaning you've read the chapter, you know where it's going. I've read ahead this, and I know what passage and story we're going to be studying, and this is going to be critical because I want to say this. You do not have to have this study memorized, but you need to be familiar enough that if I asked you, what was this about, you could tell me. And that's going to help in discipleship. And so now, what do you guys notice about the first page of this study? Huh? Okay, no, the actual first page, so the black page.
The centrality of Christ.
Okay, so what would you call that? What you're going to be learning, right? Okay. Now, what is the sentence underneath it?
Christians are people.
So hold on. It's the definition unpacking what you're going to be learning. Now, if you guys remember when we did imitate, what did we do? We looked at core practices and we broke it down, right? So we looked at something to break down. So what do we need to do in here before we even get started is we need to look for words that maybe somebody won't understand. So if you're looking through this, what are some words in the green sentence there on the book that maybe someone might not understand? Centrality, okay. How would you define centrality?
Christ was our face to all people.
Oh, okay, before you get into Christ, what is being central to something? You're in the middle of it. You're in the middle of it, right? Okay. What else? What else in these two sentences? That someone, yeah, I'm trying to help people. Yeah, I'm trying to help people with this. So what is something else people would maybe not know?
Spiritual revolution.
Okay, what is even a spiritual revolution? How would you define that? Awakening. How would you define awakening?
Just an inner turmoil.
Okay, inner turmoil, aha moment. Okay, that's Ecclesiastes right there. Okay, and so part of entering into this first session for you in your discipler is there's already questions you can start with. What is central? What is a spiritual revolution? Now you know where the study is going to be going, and you know what story you're going to be reading, but you're trying to make truth connect for your discipler. And so if they read this and you assume that they understand the sentence, what's going to happen?
It's going to fail.
It's not going to make any sense to them because they're starting from where? Not on level playing field. They have no idea what some of these words mean. So what is your responsibility then? Make it make sense, right? So practically, so that way we want to start off right. So now, as we get into this, I want you guys to turn the page. And so you guys have talked through, you've prayed for, the first page is all about connection. So turn now. And so there's two illustrations that's going to be used on that first page. Now, I'll tell you right now, the two illustrations are a cornerstone and building. Before you read it, what does a cornerstone in a building do?
Holds it up.
Holds it up. Okay. Why is the cornerstone important? Foundational, main thing. Okay.
Without it, nothing else makes sense.
Why does nothing else make sense?
Because it has to have that cornerstone to pull it all together.
Okay. Because
Well, the cornerstone, in my opinion, if I'm talking about actually building, the cornerstone has gone all the way down to the bedrock.
yeah.
The deeper than anything else. It's gone, and it then is built up off of the bedrock and forms. And so even if everything outside of the cornerstone is shiftable, the cornerstone is always going to hold.
Now, what if your cornerstone was like 2 degrees off? We said we're going to place the cornerstone right here, and it's got to face this way. But when you placed it, it was like this. What's going to happen to the blueprints?
It's going to be way out there.
It's going to get way off. And so part of that cornerstone, now that makes sense, right? The illustration makes sense. Now, the other illustration he's going to use is the idea of cornucopias, okay? It's the idea that before this guy, everyone thought everything revolved around the earth, okay? But what happened? He said, no, wait. We actually revolve around what? The sun. Now, the illustration, now why would they be talking about, if we're talking about putting Jesus at the center of our lives, why would these two illustrations be used?
Because your life should revolve around Christ.
Should revolve around Christ, okay? But where does it normally revolve?
Around yourself.
Around ourselves. Now, so we know being central to our lives is important. So why is starting off on the good cornerstone important? Because we don't want to get off track. Now, think about your own walk with the Lord. Which of those two resonate with you better? If you're trying to explain to someone what being Jesus at the center of your life looks like, which resonates with you better? Or what makes more sense to you?
The building,
The building. Why the building, Jerry?
because you get the other thing going, it's more scientific.
Hey, that's true.
Jerry, you're
Yeah.
saying Jesus is our cornerstone.
Jesus is our cornerstone. Yeah, and so that's important. But like for me, when I was reading through this study, I was like, you know what? Before Christ, we think the world revolves around us. Just like that guy thought the earth revolved, everything was revolving on the earth, but come to know science. This is a way bigger world. And so for me, when I'm reading through this, I'm like, okay, here's the study that we've going through. I've read through it. I know it. I know what illustration works for me. So I'm going to communicate that truth to my disciplee because it works for me. And so as you're developing this, because you know we're about to go to a passage where the guy experienced that very same thing. So I want you to look at the next page. It's on page 25. Now, on there's Luke chapter, what chapter was it? Luke chapter 19. Does anyone want to read that for us? Okay, Pam.
He entered Jericho and was passing through. There was a man named
Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus,
Yeah.
who was the chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but he was not able because of the crowd, since he was a short man. So running ahead, he climbed up a sycamore tree to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because today I must stay at your house." So he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. All who saw it began to complain, "He's going to lodge with a sinful man." But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, Lord, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I will pay it back 4 times as much." "Today salvation has come to this house," Jesus told him, "because he too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost."
Okay, so who are the characters in this story? And what do we learn about them?
Zacchaeus was a little guy.
He was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he? Okay. He climbed up in a sycamore tree. Okay, what do we know about Zacchaeus? He was a tax collector. Not only that, he was what? A chief tax collector. And what do we learn?
He was rich.
Very rich, it says. Who else are the other characters, and what do we learn?
The crowd.
The crowds were there, okay. Yeah, the crowds wouldn't let him in, so that's why he had to crawl and get there. Now, it's very interesting. I haven't looked at the study.
And the crowds were very judgmental.
The crowds were very judgmental. We learned that in John. And so part of this, and so now, why would we talk about the earth, us revolving around the earth or the sun? Why would that illustration connect to Zacchaeus?
Because he met Christ. It revolved around him.
Yeah, Zacchaeus, at one point, before Jesus, what? It revolved around him doing his job, his profession, getting rich. And then what happened?
He met Jesus.
He met Jesus, and what happened?
His conscience got the best of him.
He turned his life around.
He was like,
And so you see how that illustration that we talked about the earth, us thinking the earth revolves around the sun, and the connection out to Zacchaeus. And so your idea is to connect truth to this illustration. And so why would Zacchaeus give it all away? Because that's what happens in the story. Why does Zacchaeus give it all away?
Because he realized the importance of it.
He had a change of heart. Good.
it's not him anymore.
It's not him anymore.
Life is with Christ.
Now, turn the page for me. How do you think Zacchaeus thought about himself before encountering Jesus? Now, these questions are all coming from your books, and I haven't looked at them since we've been in here. But I've looked at them beforehand studying. But how do you think Zacchaeus thought about himself before encountering Jesus?
I felt pretty good about it.
Hey, thank you for the response. Now what?
I could have anything.
I can have anything? Okay.
I think he felt good about it.
What do we know about tax collectors?
They were hated. They always take more than they're supposed to.
They were hated because they always took some for themselves, right? But he was a Jewish man who worked for the evil Romans. And what? So he betrayed his family. So people hated. Now look, if you look at the top of your page, it explains that they were notorious thieves who gained their wealth by extorting money. So it provides some context to the story. So now you have Zacchaeus. He probably thought of himself, yes, he was super rich, but he's betrayed by his family, or he betrayed his family. He was alone. So he thought he was alone in this world. And what if someone's alone in this world, what happens? They feel hopeless? Do they feel loved? No. Now, do people in our church, people in our...
So I'm not gonna care about them.
Exactly. So do you think people who feel alone or hopeless feel like they have much to look forward to?
They don't.
No. And so you have Zacchaeus who hears about who? Jesus. And he walks in to the crowds. Now, let's ask this next question. Why is it important to understand that we are loved and accepted by Jesus? Because that's the only way it makes sense for Zacchaeus to give up everything, because he was alone, to follow Jesus. But why is it important to understand that we are loved and accepted by Jesus?
Without him, we're going to hell.
It sounds funny, but I think a lot of times we don't love ourselves and realize, hey, there's something that's unconditional here that we don't have to do anything for. You know?
Yeah, because what will Jesus do for Zacchaeus ultimately?
Went to his house.
He said salvation was there, but ultimately, what did he do for us? He died on the cross for us while we were still sinners, while Zacchaeus was actively sinning and stealing from his family, hated, alone, and betrayed his family. He said, salvation has come to you. And that made a difference in Zacchaeus' life.
Yeah.
And that can make a difference in your disciple's life. Because it was important because Jesus died and ultimately loved him enough to die for him. But what changed in Zacchaeus' life as a result?
Instead of a thief,
He gave all of his money back.
yeah.
So how he viewed people changed. He gave his life to the Lord. How he viewed money changed. And so you have this core truth that he made Jesus essential to his life, and that resulted in what? Change of heart. Transformation is happening. So in disciple making, what is the goal? To see transformation. And so as we get into this next part, I keep doing this because we're trying to move through. Why is this so difficult? Why is giving up money, why is what we see in Zacchaeus so hard? Page 27. It's because often in our lives, we are at the center. That's the hardest part of it. But what's the freeing part about it? Of this new perspective?
The guilt. You don't have the guilt anymore.
He doesn't have to feel guilt anymore. He doesn't have to feel alone anymore. And so you have this, again, this core truth that you started with, this spiritual revolution. It's like, okay, this is what this looks like. A spiritual revolution in your life is you're made new. That you have felt unloved, now you are. And so this is why truth matters and how we present it. And so this is what I love about this, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. So here's what I love about this curriculum. Is you're free to use it how you see fit, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because turn the page now to page 28. What does it say on page 28? It says engage, and it lists out 2 other passages, and then all bunch of things you need to do. Now, Scripture is great, but what was the main passage about Zacchaeus? Now, these 2 passages have something to do with what we're talking about, but what was one of the things I said last week? You do not want to overload your discipler or disciplee. Why? Because you can put all these truths out in front of them, and then they don't know what to do with it. And so here's what I would suggest. Why I said you don't have to reinvent the wheel is because if you turn to page 32, actually page 35 is where we're going to have to go, is because this provides applications and next steps for you. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel in discipleship. It's, hey, what is this truth that we're trying to land? And I think on page 35, there's a super easy one. Because thinking about Zacchaeus, what does it say on the page 35? It says, can I see your book now? Sorry. It says, take a few moments and examine what it looks like to make Jesus central in the following 4 areas of your own life. We looked at a story of Zacchaeus who was robbing people, and that changed because of Jesus. Now it says, look at 4 areas of your own life. And it talks about relationships and finances, time and schedule and sex. And so it has all these different things to where then you can make the application for your disciplee. Now, did you come up with any of that? No. All the material is right here. And so you're free to use it how you want. It's because it's aimed to be a tool for you. And so, that's what I was just saying. And then, here's the truth. In discipleship, in this goal, is they're always aim for one doable next step. Now, in this story, in your disciplee, you could give them the whole entire book, because that's the way this is set up. It's set up so that way, once you get after the story, they can do engage, they can do the weekly activities, they can do a reading plan, they can do this, they can do a personal study. But here's what I'll tell you what I know about people. You say, hey, do all these 5 things next week before we meet, what's going to happen? They won't do it. And so what I would suggest is looking through this study, and if you look on page 29, it lists out all these random things you could do. It talks about your options under weekly activities. And so if you're looking for a clear next step for your disciplee, well, there's a whole bunch here. It talks about spending time with God by engaging devotional experience on page 31. Or it's like, hey, connect with God each day through prayer, and it lists out a prayer for them to pray. And then it talks about the personal studies that we looked at. They can do that one. Or it even says, what? Application here. And then the applications are connect with your church, go to church with your finances, memorize this scripture. And so you have all these resources available for you. Because when I was meeting with, whose book was this? Oh yeah, sorry, that way you guys can see it. When I was meeting with people about doing this class, everyone was like, well, I don't know what to teach. I don't know what to give them. Yeah.
Well, backing up way to the beginning, what I don't understand is how you change a relationship from you know somebody and you're interacting and everything. How do you change to, do you want to do a book? I mean, and why are you in charge and not them when you're talking mutually, I mean, you're kind of coming across as, I'm more spiritual than you. I hope you want to do a book with me. I mean, how do you get to that point?
So real briefly, this is what I think. I think in that situation, you've already built the relational trust. So then asking someone, I know you worry about becoming off spiritual, like over spiritual, like, hey, I'm more spiritual than you. But what's our command from God, our commission? To go and make disciples. And so it's simply like, I'm wanting to help you become a more and better follower of Jesus. And if Jesus is the center of your life, shouldn't you want that too? And so ultimately, the person you're going to be discipling, and you wouldn't want to say it in a way that's going to come across that way, and I don't think you would. But simply coming alongside of somebody like the guy I'm discipling, I said, hey, I think discipleship would be good for you. Would you want to meet with me once a week?
We'll say, let's do this together.
Let's do this together, because the goal is not to walk ahead of them.
You're not.
It's your doctrine, it's your, that's what I'm kind of struggling with.
It's my doctrine. It's
Well,
your.
I mean, like the friend I have in mind.
Okay, yeah.
She is from a different faith. She's, why is she going to listen to mine, rather than hers?
So this is what I would say. This is when I know me and you talked, so this is a peek behind the curtain. So we also have another study. If you're discipling someone who is not of the same faith, there's a whole different study for that one. But this was like if someone has given their life to the Lord and you're trying to help them follow Jesus, this is how I designed this class. So someone of another faith, there's a book called Starting Point. It's a conversation about faith. That's a completely different vein, and I think that's the better route to go with someone who doesn't believe the same things you do. Because you can't just be like, hey, I'm going to get you saved by doing this book, because that's not going to work. But having an open conversation with someone of a different faith, I think is a different route to go, and I think it's the better route to go. So we could talk more. I know we have to go very quickly. But again, reminding everyone, discipleship is intentionally entering into relationships to help people follow Jesus and be changed by Jesus, enjoying the mission of Jesus. And I'll tell you, and you have a part to play. And so part of when we started this, when I was going through Matthew, I feel like everyone's shutting their books. I want to see discipleship become a part of our culture here. I want to see it as our responsibility to help others grow. And when we were praying about this, we wanted to start here. And so if you feel like you can disciple somebody, we have people in mind. We've had 9 people get baptized this year. 2 of them are being discipled right now. That's not enough. So we need people. So if you feel like the Lord, pray about it, but don't talk yourself out of it. Here's what I'll tell you. You can do it, and we'll help you. And so if you want to keep looking at this study, you want to look at different ones, I'll help you walk through it. You can practice on me. But we want to see discipleship matter in our church. And if we want to see more and better followers of Jesus, it's going to take you playing a part. And I know that could be intimidating. I know that can sound scary. But ultimately, for a lot of you, you've been following Jesus for many years. And so you simply want to help them become a better follower of Jesus, and you walk alongside of them, not ahead of them. And so what I want to do is I want to pray real quick, and then I'll have to go because we have a family Sunday soon. So let me pray real quick, and then we'll get out of here. God, we love you, and thank you for this time just to look at disciple making. We do pray this for the life of our church. We want to see more and better followers of Jesus and allow us to play a part in that. So God, go before us now. Trust you in all things. Amen.